I think one thing as a journalist, you have to be ready to depart your desk at any time. There might be a fire, a shooting, a terrorist attack, there might be a hurricane, and you have to go report on it.
One of the most important things of participating in a reporting trip like this is that you get the experience of doing journalism in a different environment, in something that's not familiar to you.
This trip is really important because I think in New York you can do a lot of reporting, but it's hard to do reporting about a specific area unless you're there and you see the people and you talk to them.
Do actually meet people who were affected by the hurricane. So it's not just talking and looking at the pictures in the New York Times, it's actually seeing it and experience it firsthand.
You can see pictures, you can see videos, but it's different when someone lets you into their home and you get to see what kind of horrible situations they've been living under.
After the original 2 hurricanes happened last fall, there was a lot of mainstream media coverage and then a giant dip in coverage of Puerto Rico. So I think a lot of people in the mainland US forget about Puerto Rico.
NYU Journalism decided to send students to Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria because it's real, because the need is there, because they needed our voices. It's real world journalism, and that's what we do here.
It really allows students to have a different experience. There's so much that you can learn in a classroom, but when you're on the ground, when you need to deal with problems that you might not expect to find, this really tests your ability to be resourceful, to be a good and fair journalist, and also to try to see things a little bit differently.
On Thursday afternoon, we arrived at the hotel at 2, we had an interview at 4, but there was a major power outage that left 900,000 people without power, and our interviews were canceled. So first 2 interviews of the day and of the trip were canceled, but we had to just keep rolling and figure out how we were going to manage without these 2 expert sources.
Yesterday we ended up going to the center of the island and we to a small town called Caguas, and we got in a lot of interviews at a domestic violence shelter there.
It was also good for trying to learn how to deal with unexpected situations that pop up. Like we had no choice but to do one of our interviews outside, and the weather was terrible, and it was, the audio we were hoping wouldn't be a problem. The video, our subject was holding an umbrella in the shot, and it was a lot of trying to work around different unexpected things that popped up. So that I for sure see helping me in the future.
One of the best parts, which wasn't planned at all, and that's why it was so good, is when I went to interview the captain at the police station, he then walked me to a project housing where I could get some really good pictures. And I think the best part of being a journalist is going where the story takes you and you never know where it will.
Going to Puerto Rico for me, it was a great example of just kind of boots on the ground journalism, just going into a place and then just following the story and seeing where it took you. So it was really immersive and just a prime example of what it would be like, in the field if your boss told you to go to Puerto Rico and do a story.
I also think one major part of being a journalist and training to become a journalist is pushing your comfort zone.
All the preparation you do in the world might not matter when you get there and it's just not what you're expecting, so just go with it.
Yeah, and I think just be confident and be a good listener and try to figure out the story. Just pay very close attention to what's happening around you so that you can then take the narrative that's happening around you and then turn it into a larger story and figure out how the pieces connect.
Right, because in some ways the narrative we went there with was not the narrative we ended up pursuing because things change when you're actually there. And the post-production process has also been a real learning experience, even though we're not in Puerto Rico anymore, because this is the biggest chance I've ever had to do something a story this deep and this big and this important. So just learning how to work with someone while we do that and learning how to just take all of it and put it together into a coherent story, that's been, I know this is going to help me in the future.
NYU Journalism teamed up with the Center for Investigative Journalism in Puerto Rico. The collaboration was great, and as a result, one of our students have already had her work published in publications throughout Latin America and in the USA. And we're really looking forward to more students getting published.
My story from Puerto Rico got published and I'm really happy about it. It got picked up by 5 different websites: Telemundo Puerto Rico, El Nuevo Herald, Noticel, Metro Puerto Rico, and Latino Rebels. I'm really happy that my story got published. It's a really important story, and I think that it's great that it's out there.
I'm really, really lucky to have been able to come here and to have met the people I met. Puerto Ricans are the nicest people ever, and even with all the situations that they've dealt, they are so kind and giving, and I've been really lucky.
So that's part of the training and experience we're getting in Puerto Rico because we're reporting real stories, but I also think that's just part of the important training of a real journalist.